Of the elections might have been won, but the war is not over, as both the African National Congress have received less than 50% in Tshwane, Johannesburg and Ekurhuleni. Now, both of them, that being the ANC as well as DA, are seeking help for smaller parties to govern in these big metros. Joining us now from our Cape Town studios is Professor Jaap de Visser. He was a director at the Dullah Omar Institute, University of the Western Cape. Good to have you with us today, Prof, and thank you so much for making time. Let's get your quick analysis and a response to the overall elections. Clearly, some of the key themes here are the fact that lessons have to be learned, in particular by the ruling party, before we actually dissect into coalitions. But your overall response to the figures and results that came through on Saturday?
Yeah, good afternoon. Thanks for having me. So the election produced about 27 municipalities without an outright majority, and they are spread all over the country. Each of the 9 provinces has a few of those so-called hung councils. The Western Cape and KwaZulu-Natal have the most in terms of numbers, but of course all the attention goes to the big metros, the 8 biggest municipalities in the country. And if we look at those 8, then 4 of them have an outright majority. That is Buffalo City, the city of Cape Town, Mangaung and eThekwini. So there are no immediate governance problems there because they are ready to form a government. The other 4, the first 2, there's no outright majority, but not a huge problem in my view. That is Ekurhuleni and Nelson Mandela Bay. In both of those metros, there is a winner, and there are smaller parties that can offer sufficient seats to take that winner into a majority. The DA has won the largest number of seats in Nelson Mandela Bay, and there are a number of small parties that, if the DA plays its cards right, it could put together a coalition with and govern Nelson Mandela Bay. And the same applies to the ANC in Ekurhuleni, which is the largest number of seats it has won, and there are a number of smaller parties that could bring the ANC into a majority. However, the 2 most difficult ones are the city of Johannesburg and Tshwane, because there are 3 major parties that did well in the elections, the ANC, the DA and the EFF, of course with the ANC losing support. But the key thing now is that none of those 3 have an outright majority. And the difficulty is that the smaller parties do not really offer enough seats for any of those 3 to put together a majority coalition with in any comfortable way. So bottom line is that between the 3 of them, a solution has to be found. Either an ANC-DA coalition, a DA-EFF coalition, or an ANC-EFF coalition. That seems to be the way forward for the 2 biggest cities, and those are complicated negotiations.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because they are very complicated negotiations from what we understand, as you allude to. But in your view, how would these, or the execution of these coalitions, work best? ANC together with the EFF, or the EFF together with the DA? And more importantly so, would it be advisable to have a blanket negotiation and coalition partnership here, or one that is focused to the different municipalities and metros that are key to these parties?
I think what has made things rather difficult is the fact that both the Democratic Alliance and the EFF have indicated before and during the elections that they are not interested in entering into a coalition with the ANC. Now that obviously limits the number of permutations that are possible quite drastically. I'm not sure whether those are comments that were made in the heat of the elections and now staring down a possible stalemate, perhaps things are possible again. But if none of those 3 parties can put themselves over that reluctance, then you're looking at a crisis in governance, and that's really not where we want to be, particularly not in those 2 big cities that mean such a lot for the country and for the continent as a whole. Ideally, one would want a coalition to be crafted on the basis of a political agreement that also gives clarity as to what is the policy going forward for those cities. But they have very little time. There's only 2 weeks as of last Saturday that they have to put together a coalition, and I'm afraid a lot of attention will go in those coalition talks to the question as to who gets what position. Because in the end, a coalition needs to be cemented by the distribution of leadership positions in the municipality. So who becomes the mayor, who becomes the deputy mayor, who will be a member of the executive, and possibly chairpersons of committees. Those are sort of the instruments, or the sweeteners, if you want to call it that, that those parties have to court each other into a coalition agreement.
Very briefly though, Professor,
thing has been, yeah?
Do coalitions always work?
They do not always work. We've had a fair amount of experience with coalitions in South Africa. Of course, we had the Coalition of National Unity at national government level shortly after the fall of apartheid. We had a ANC-IFP coalition in the province of KwaZulu-Natal until 1999. Those were relatively successful coalitions. At local government level, we have, of course, the coalition that Helen Zille put together when she became mayor of the city of Cape Town in 2006. That was a coalition against all odds, but it turned out to be a fairly stable one. However, in smaller municipalities, we've seen some very erratic coalitions, very unsuccessful ones. Mentioning, for example, Oudtshoorn and Swellendam in the Western Cape, where residents really bore the brunt of erratic politics as a result of coalitions going from one side to the other.
Thank you so much for your time today, Professor. Your time is greatly appreciated. We look forward to getting further insight from you. That was Professor Jaap de Visser, who's a director at the Dullah Omar Institute at the University of the Western Cape. Stay with us. When we come back, we shift our focus to the latest developments that we see in the small business community, in particular, spaza shops, right after this.